What do you want to be when you grow up? We all got asked that as kids, and back then the answer felt simple. But now we're grown, and for a lot of us, that question is still unanswered. Hey, I'm Ariel, and if you've ever felt stuck in your career or just curious about what other jobs are out there, you're not alone. That's exactly why I started Still Browsing, a podcast all about exploring different career paths and uncovering options you might not have considered. In this first episode, I'm sharing my own career journey, how I realized the job I thought I wanted wasn't for me, and why I'm on a mission to help others find careers that actually fit. Let's dive in. My mom has a collection of all of my things from my entire life, like a lot of moms do. One of the things she has is a yearbook from Head Start, where I was voted most likely to be a teacher. When I was a kid, I was like very bossy and I loved school so much. And I had like a little rug in my bedroom with a bookshelf and a little rocking chair. And I would read books to my stuffed animals. And everybody just thought I would make a really good teacher. So that started in Head Start. And it kind of went with me my whole life. I think at one point I wanted to be an attorney. That was like in fifth grade, but it changed. By the time I was graduating high school, I wanted to go to college to get an education degree and become an elementary school teacher. Initially, I wanted to do special education, but that changed and I became a general classroom teacher. Teaching for me was an interesting experience. I taught at an inner city school. I actually taught in the same school district that I had went to when I was a child. And it was not good. The first 2 years as a teacher were two of the hardest years of my life. I'm not even going to hold you. The role that you think teaching is going to be when you're in undergrad, it is not what it is on that first day of teaching. I think my first day as a teacher, I ended the day in tears. I was not prepared. I thought I was prepared. I thought I was a good teacher. I had did student teaching. I had excelled in it. But my first day as a teacher in that school was just terrible. I think one of the students asked me, was I the substitute teacher and was the real teacher coming? Because that's how bad the day was. I can laugh now. I was crying back then. That was like over 10 years ago. So it started off really rough. It did get better. I became a better teacher. I became better at classroom management, better at delivering lessons, better at managing the workload as a teacher. I just became better. But deep down inside, I knew being a classroom teacher wasn't something I wanted to be. I've always loved the transfer of knowledge, the transfer of information. I'm a natural educator, but the job of classroom teacher just wasn't for me. There was this nagging feeling inside of me that kept telling me that, like, this isn't where you belong. This isn't where you should be. This isn't for you. This isn't the life you should be living. And I kind of ignored it because honestly, I had gone to school for 4 years to get an elementary education degree. I had went to get my master's degree in education. I actually spent my first 2 years of teaching. I was also simultaneously going to grad school, getting a graduate degree in education. So that's 6 years of education, some of which I've had to pay for. I was like, I'm going to make this work because I've spent a lot of time learning these skills and I've spent a lot of money learning these skills. And so I'm going to do this job. I'm going to see it through. And so one of the things I did to try to adjust was to move from job to job. But I left that school and moved states and taught at a different type of school. So I went from teaching at a public school to teaching at a charter school. Same population of students, but I felt like the structure of a charter would be better. It was almost worse, y'all. It was almost worse. It was a very punitive environment. I I have PTSD from that. 8, 9 months I was over there at that school. It was that's a story for a different day. If y'all want that in the episode, I am happy to detail just how awful charter schools are. I have my opinions. But After that didn't work out, I was like, okay, let me try a different school, a different population. So I moved states again and found another job, my last teaching job, which I stayed at for about 4 years. And I found more balance there. So I was able to do it longer. But it got to the point, even with that job, where the school, it was the best that it could be. I'm going to be honest with you. You know how teachers complain about money and lack of support and limited resources and class size and parent involvement. All of those things were perfect. I never wanted for anything as a teacher in that role. I was well supported. I was thriving in it. It was the best that it could be as far as external factors were concerned. And I was well respected as an educator in that environment. However, I still was getting that nagging in my spirit that I didn't want to be there. Towards the end of my teaching career, right before the pandemic struck, it was getting worse and worse. Like I would be driving to work and I would just be dreading it. I lived about an hour away from my school. So I would always get to work about an hour early so that I could beat traffic. And I would just sit in the car until the last minute, sitting there, like just dreading on my lunch breaks. And we used to have really great lunch breaks because they would be like lunch breaks back to our planning periods, back to the kids' recess. So the middle of my day was just empty for planning, eating, whatever I needed to do. And y'all, I got to the point where I literally would just go to my car during that time, get in my car and sleep for those like 2 hours because I did not want to be in that building. And there was nothing wrong. There was nothing going on. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I was sick of it. I did not like the role. I loved being a teacher, but I did not like the role as a classroom teacher. And so then the pandemic hit and we started working from home. Now, I don't think people really understand that being an in classroom teacher is not the same as being an online instructor. And so while I was contracted to be an in person teacher through circumstance, I was now an online instructor, which was an entirely different ballgame. At the time, I was also doing in-home tutoring on the side, and I had to transition that into online tutoring, which I still do to this day. But all of that was a transition. I didn't even know that it was really possible to be a classroom teacher in that environment. And to be honest, it is my belief that it's not really a good way to teach a large group of students. It's great for tutoring one-on-one or like small groups, but they really wanted us to like imitate how we were trained to teach as classroom teachers. And they wanted us to transition to that online. And it was extremely stressful. I hated it. I didn't hate it more than in-person teaching, but I was very frustrated. We learned a lot of these tactics and things in college. And so there wasn't enough time invested into transitioning us from being in-person teachers to online instructors. It was just very stressful. I was sick of the meetings. I was just sick and tired of the politics. I got tired of it. And I got really sick, like mentally ill, to the point where I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. Like I'm waking up crying. All I got to do is go from my bedroom. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment at the time. I got to go from my bedroom just a few steps away to my dining room, just open the computer and work. And I just dreaded it every single day. You think classroom teachers have a hard time finding work-life balance? And let me tell you, when you're teaching from your home like that, the work-life balance pretty much was non-existent. That coupled with the pandemic, and I pretty much just had a mental breakdown. I had a mentee B, as the young people would say. I had a mentee B, and I just was like, I can't do this anymore. So when Christmas came in 2020, I just decided that I wasn't going to go back into the classroom. I did not go back after the Christmas break. And I had no idea what I was going to do next. You know how what's behind you is so bad that you don't even know what's possible or what's next, but you know what you can't do anymore. You know what you got to get away from. And so I was like, I don't know what's next, but I have to trust the process. I have to trust myself. I will figure it out because I cannot go back to being a classroom teacher. I am not going to live in this kind of stress. I am not going to be dealing with these politics and these changing things and just dealing with this new way of existing. I don't even want to do this job. I don't want to do it. I'm not invested enough in being a classroom teacher in order to be making these shifts and playing these games that they wanted to be played. At that point, I wasn't working at all. For the start of 2021, I probably didn't work for about 6 months. I think it was 5 or 6 months. I was just figuring life out. During that time, I did move states and I made the transition into corporate. During that time where I was deciding how I was going to transition, I'm like, what else can I do with an education degree? What's on the other side of this? So I just started researching and researching. And at the time, honestly, teaching is a job that requires so much performance that I was just looking for a role where I can sit down and just do repetitive work. I just wanted my brain and my body to find predictable, stable work that I didn't have to use so many brain muscles to get done. And so I was looking for anything. I was like, okay, maybe I could be an administrative assistant. Maybe I can be, I don't know. I explored a lot of different roles. Somebody I knew was working for the city or the county or something. They were working, it was like a government job, and they were just processing those claims when doctors have malpractice or something, and they got file claims in order to get reinstated or something. I'm like, oh, okay, paperwork job. Like, let me do a paperwork job. Where I can just sit and I can work and I don't have to worry about managing students and following the lesson and making sure that everybody's doing well and making sure that I'm hitting this marker and that marker. So I explored so many different roles. My priority at the time wasn't money. I was willing to take a pay cut. I was willing. I was open. And I was open to new possibilities because I knew I could not go back to teaching. I'm like, something is going to have to change. I can't go back. So I'm gonna have to figure out what is ahead. I did have therapy during that time because again, I was going through just a mental breakdown. Therapy helped me a lot with working through my anxieties around job security and all of those types of things and narrowing down really what I was looking for. Ultimately, I decided that I still wanted to be able to use what I already had. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel and start from the very beginning. For me, that meant working in the field of education, just not in the school environment. That's how I entered into education technology. Since then, I'm still working in education technology today. I've had multiple roles within the education technology world. The first role I had was a renewal specialist, essentially an account manager. The company I worked for had just acquired another company and they didn't have anybody to manage the renewals for the product that they had acquired. And so I took on all of those accounts, and there were a lot of them. And it was just me. And y'all, I was processing the renewals for like their largest accounts down to their the tiniest little accounts that they had. And that was my first introduction into that world. And there were some interesting things that happened there. That's a story for a different day, but that was my introduction. From there, I worked at a few different companies doing the same type of work. I liked the work that I was doing. First of all, it was salary plus commission. But what that meant was that I was always going to get paid, but on top of that, I can always expect more money each month based on what we had renewed. Loved that. I did take a huge pay cut. I was teaching in a district where teachers made decent money. So I took maybe like a $20,000 pay cut in order to do this job. But again, that wasn't my priority. My priority was doing a job that I could do easy. I meant to say that earlier when I was saying that I was open. So anyway, I really enjoyed the work that I was doing. I enjoyed the commission. I was working with teachers. And so I would just talk to teachers and principals and people in district offices and help them to renew their subscriptions for their schools and districts. And it was a very simple work. It wasn't hard. The conversations I was having weren't hard. I learned about objection handling and just like all these really cool things, skills that you can really just use elsewhere. From there, I transitioned into sales. I became an SDR, which is really an entry level position to a sales role. I liked being an SDR as well. It was like that same structure of salary plus commission. So that was great. What I didn't like about the SDR role that I was in was that I felt like the company I was with had the sellers always made me feel like I was the help. And I didn't like that, especially as a Black woman in that environment. My role was important. I sent them a lot of the customers that they were able to close. But it's like my work wasn't respected, even though it was such an important factor in what they were doing. And I didn't like that. But it was a great position in the sense that I worked very independently. Nobody was breathing down my back. They trusted me to do my job. But then if there was something they didn't want to do, they would kind of be like, oh, the SDRs can do it. And it's kind of like, no, the SDRs can't do it. Like, I could not stand that. But also, in addition to that, I was definitely coming to the point where I was ready to establish what I was going to do next. I had kind of spent that 3-4 years in that transition period of figuring out, like, what do I want to do? I just want to do a job. I just want to do something that isn't teaching. And so as an SDR, I just kind of started getting to that point where I'm like, I'm tired of just having a job. I want to use my brain again. I'm ready to get back out there, start owning my career path, owning my work. I'm sick of being in a place of, I'm going to just work and go home. Yeah, that's fine. It served me. And I don't judge a single person that's doing that. I completely understand. I do. But it was time for me to move into something else that was more aligned with what my soul needed. And so from there, a friend of mine, she and I were just talking, and I was telling her about everything that was going on. And I don't even think I realized it at the time. I don't know what I thought she did for work, but she was an instructional designer. And she was asking me, have you ever heard about being an instructional designer? Would you consider it? And I was like, what is an instructional designer? Like, what is it that you do? And she started telling me what she did for work. And I was just like, wow, like that really does sound like something I would be interested in. She was just casually mentioning it. And she was talking about how she had wanted to be a teacher initially. And then she said it wasn't for her. And I completely understand that. It wasn't for me either. But I stuck it out for like 7 years. But she knew right away that she wasn't going to be able to do it. And so she kind of transitions into like more of the HR space. And after she transitioned into like the HR space, that's when she started making a name for herself in the instructional design space. And so now I am also an instructional designer. I've just started my instructional design career maybe like 4 months ago. I'm very new to it and I'm very excited about it. It's a career that invites a lot of former teachers. So it's like the perfect place for us. And I will be doing an episode on being an instructional designer. I love it. I'm absolutely happy that I landed here. I look forward to growing in this career space. I am doing it in the education technology realm today. I'm still considering whether I want to stay in education technology, which I do still love ed tech. I do. Or if I want to expand and go into other industries. Personally, I think I do better in spaces where I feel knowledgeable. And you guys can tell me if you feel that as well. But if I feel knowledgeable in an area, I feel like I can contribute, then I'm going to do better professionally. And so that's why I think ed tech has been such a great space for me coming out as a former teacher. But I am also, again, very open to new experiences and new industries and learning about other products and other things out there. And if I can transfer, I know I can transfer the instructional design and education background to really any industry. I am very much a dreamer. So, as long as I have breath in my body, I'm in that transition. I'm going to change. I'm going to do me. And I'm going to remain open to life's possibilities. So that's a little bit about me and my career journey this far. I will expand on many of the topics I discuss here in future episodes. So definitely stick around for that. But let's talk about why I created Still Browsing. In a nutshell, this is a career ideas podcast. I think that it's crazy that when we are 17, 18 years old, people are looking at us to make a decision about what we are going to do for the rest of our lives. And I remember being a 17-year-old, 18-year-old going through these conversations with counselors and the adults in my life, and they never really express that life is going to change. Who you are today is not who you're going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. They didn't express that. And yet there is this pressure to pick a major and to get a job, especially for millennials. You know, our Gen X parents really told us, go to college, take out the loans, get a degree, get a job, and that's what's going to make life stable. It hasn't really worked out like that for us millennials now, has it? And I think it's ridiculous that we are pressured into that kind of a decision at 18 years old. We have no idea who we are, what we want. Some people get lucky, but most of us don't have a clue. It's cute to ask a 7-year-old what they want to be. They're dreamers. Yeah, they want to be an astronaut. By the time that same 7-year-old is 17, they're like, nah, I want to be an accountant, you know. And then by the time they're 27, they want to be a social media influencer or whatever the case may be. I think a lot of us would have chosen differently in those moments if we would have known what's out there. What are my options? At 18, I didn't know. I was in a bad financial situation. I grew up in poverty. So I'm looking to make my way out of poverty. Education is now my ticket out of this city. And I have no idea what options are out there. I'm just latching on to something, right? So I latched on to teaching. People always said I would be a good teacher. I loved education. I loved school, loved the structure of it. It worked out for me. I was good at it. So I went to school for education. Knowing who I am today and knowing what I know about life today, I would have never chosen to go to school for education at the age of 18. I would have picked something else. I had a lot of motivation. I had a lot of drive. I could have been anything. I could have been a cardiologist. I could have been an astronaut. I would have made a great journalist or a good scientist, a good researcher. Not to say I can't transition into those things today. I can. But had I started early in my life with options, I may have chosen something, and I might have chosen wrong, right? I might still have chosen wrong. I might have. That's possible. My point is, and why I started this podcast is because I believe that all of us need options. Whether you are 18 years old trying to figure out what degree you're going to get, or you're post grad and you didn't got this degree and you're like, no, what I've chosen isn't what I want. Or whether you are in your 30s and you're like, hey, I've spent the last decade of my life in a career, I hate it and I want to go do something else. And you're just standing there at that crossroad of like, what next? What now? I thought that this is what I was supposed to do. And now I'm standing here and I just don't have a clue where to go next. So my whole goal for this podcast is just to give you options. It's just to show you what else is out there, and hopefully something you will hear from one of my guests, something that you hear from me will spark your curiosity and make you go research the career. And maybe you don't choose that career. Maybe that career takes you down a path of another career that you are interested in, you know? And maybe you just need information on like how to use the skills you have to go into something else. Hopefully, you'll listen to this podcast and you'll be able to at least start in a direction. You'll know what options are available to you. That way you can actually just make a choice. It might not be the choice, but you will be able to make a choice and you'll be able to try something new or pursue something new that you may not have considered before. So on this podcast, we're going to be talking to all kinds of professionals from every single walk of life, every industry. The goal here is to do 100 interviews with 100 professionals. With that being said, I'm extending an invitation to all of you who are listening. If you work in a career that you know a lot about, or maybe that you're passionate about, I would love to have you on to discuss it. If you know somebody who would love to come onto the podcast and help us reach 100 interviews, please send them my way. I'd be happy to interview them. I just want to make sure that this is a huge resource that people can come to. I want to give you as many career options as possible so that you can make a choice for yourself that is a better fit than whatever you're doing now, or just to help you get out of that space of, I don't know what's next. As I said, you can expect guest interviews with professionals from different industries. I'm going to be breaking down what different jobs pay, what they involved, and how to get into them. If all of this sounds like something you need, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. That is going to be the most active platform for this podcast. So that's going to be the best one for you to follow to stay up to date with it. If you have any career ideas that you would like me to cover, please send them to me at stillbrowsingpodcast@gmail.com. And if you know someone who's stuck in their career, make sure you send them the podcast so that they also can learn about the other careers that are out there and maybe hopefully hear one that will get them unstuck. Thank you so much for listening to the very first episode. I hope you choose to stick around. I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.